Imagine you wake up tomorrow and everyone around you is already planning your funeral. Not because you're sick, not because you're old, but because the moment you were born, the countdown started. Your family is mapping out where your body will rest. Your servants are cataloging everything you'll need in the next life. Architects are sketching blueprints for a monument that will outlast every civilization currently on Earth. And you haven't even had breakfast yet. This wasn't a nightmare. This was Tuesday in ancient Egypt. And the wildest part? Nobody thought this was insane. Because in ancient Egypt, death wasn't the end of the story, it was the entire point of the story. Every pyramid, every mummy, every golden mask wasn't about celebrating life. It was about one thing: absolute, visceral, obsessive terror of disappearing. And once you understand that, you'll realize these people weren't so different from you. Let's talk about what happens to a human brain when, from the moment of birth, every single person around you drops to the ground and calls you a god. Not a great leader, not an impressive man. A literal deity in human flesh. If you were a pharaoh, this was your reality. You were Horus walking the earth, the sky god made skin and bone. The Nile flooded because of you. The crops grew because of you. The sun rose every morning because, frankly, you allowed it. Now, psychologically, what does that do to a person? Modern psychology has a term for this: narcissistic enmeshment. When a child is raised without the psychological friction of being told no, without consequence, without accountability, without a single human being who treats you as an equal, the brain builds a self-image that is structurally untethered from reality. You don't just think you're better than everyone. You genuinely cannot conceive of a world in which you are not the center. But here's the twist, and this is the part nobody talks about. The pressure was catastrophic. Because if the Nile didn't flood on schedule, if the crops failed, if a plague hit, if the sky turned the wrong color, that was on you. Not metaphorically, literally. You, the living God, had failed to maintain cosmic order. The Egyptian concept of ma'at, balance, truth, universal order, was the pharaoh's personal job description. Imagine being CEO of the entire universe, with no HR department, no board of directors, and an angry population of millions who believe your incompetence caused the drought. They were narcissists by design, and prisoners by consequence. Absolute power didn't liberate these men. It locked them inside a narcissistic cocoon they could never escape. Because the moment the god mask slipped, the whole empire's psychological infrastructure collapsed with it. But why would you spend 60 years building a grave? Let's be brutally honest about what mummification actually was. It wasn't a ceremony. It wasn't a beautiful ritual honoring the cycle of life. It was a panic response. The ancient Egyptians lived in one of the harshest environments on the planet. The desert killed without warning. Disease swept through communities with zero explanation. Children died. Soldiers vanished. The Nile, the literal source of all life, could turn against you in a season. These people were surrounded by death every single day. And the human brain, your brain, my brain, their brain cannot process the concept of its own non-existence without generating a full-scale psychological emergency. So what did they do? They refused to accept it. The Egyptian belief wasn't simply, there's a heaven. It was a detailed, legally structured, almost bureaucratically obsessive architecture of the afterlife, designed specifically to make death feel defeatable. The field of reeds, their version of paradise, wasn't a vague spiritual destination. It was a specific place, with land, with a house, with your family, with your possessions. You didn't just die and float into the light, you relocated. Mummification was the moving van. The tomb was the new apartment. The shabtis, those little servant figurines buried alongside the dead, were basically pre-hired staff for your next address. This was not faith. This was control, psychological need to impose structure on the most uncontrollable event in human existence, your own death. And honestly, you do the same thing, just in a different font. Now let's talk about the Book of the Dead. Because if you think your HR department has a complicated onboarding packet, you have not seen ancient Egyptian afterlife admin. The Book of the Dead was a personalized collection of spells, instructions, and magic passwords written specifically for you, designed to help your soul navigate the underworld without getting annihilated. This wasn't bedside reading. This wasn't comfort theology. This was a cheat code. The Hall of Two Truths, where your soul was judged, worked like this. Your heart was literally placed on a scale against a feather. If your heart was heavier than the feather weighed down by sin, a crocodile-headed monster named Amit ate it permanently. Game over. No respawn. But if you had the right spells, you could essentially argue your way through. The Book of the Dead contained 192 spells, including one called the Negative Confession, where you listed every sin you didn't commit in front of 42 divine judges. Think of it as a spiritual subscription service. Rich enough to afford a premium Book of the Dead, with custom spells, illustrations, your name written in gold, you had the legal firepower of a divine defense attorney. Poor? You got the basic plan, and you hoped for the best. Even in the afterlife, class inequality followed you through the gate. But here's the question that should genuinely disturb you. Why did they do it? Not the Pharaoh, not the priests. The regular people, the farmers, the craftsmen, the laborers who spent their entire lives building a monument to someone else's immortality. And here's what most history books get wrong. The pyramid builders weren't slaves. Archaeological evidence, workers' villages, medical records, graffiti on the stones shows these were paid laborers. Fed, housed, even given medical care. They chose this. So why would you voluntarily dedicate your life to building someone else's tomb? Because in a world of pure, relentless desert chaos, the pyramid was the most stable thing in existence. The Pharaoh's Immortality Project gave every person in Egypt a role, a rank, a reason to wake up tomorrow morning. In a landscape where the environment was actively trying to kill you, the collective delusion of divine order was the most psychologically rational thing available. This is what psychologists call shared meaning-making. The human brain cannot survive in a world without narrative. It cannot tolerate pure randomness. It will invent a story, a grand, cosmic story, and then work itself to death inside that story because the alternative is staring into the void with nothing to hold on to. The pyramid wasn't just a tomb. It was the national story. The shared hallucination that gave 3 million people a reason to cooperate in the middle of a desert, and it worked. For 3,000 years. Here's what I didn't tell you at the start. This video isn't really about ancient Egypt. It's about you. Because every psychological mechanism we just walked through, the obsession with legacy, the terror of being forgotten, the desperate need to build something that outlasts your body, the collective story that makes the unbearable feel purposeful. You're running all of it, right now, today. You curate your social media profile like it's a tomb inscription, a carefully managed record of who you were, designed to outlast your mortal body in digital amber. You build your career like it's a pyramid, pouring decades of labor into a structure that, if you're lucky, will carry your name for a few generations after you're gone. You run from silence, from stillness, from the unscheduled Tuesday afternoon with nothing to fill it. Because in the quiet, the same thought surfaces that kept ancient Egyptians up at night. What if none of this means anything? The ancient Egyptians weren't primitive. They weren't superstitious fools building oversized sandcastles. They were human beings with the same neurological hardware you have staring into the same abyss. They just built their coping mechanism in limestone. Yours might be a career, a following, a family legacy, a perfectly curated digital footprint, different material, same architecture. They were obsessed with preservation, terrified of being forgotten, and absolutely ruthless in their execution. Sound familiar? The Field of Reeds was never just a place they believed in. It was the thing that made 3,000 years of impossible human effort feel worth it. And whatever your Field of Reeds looks like, the question Egypt is really asking you, across 5,000 years of silence, is this: are you building a life or just a very elaborate tomb?